Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner. What is MCP? Is MCP AI agent? I don't know. We'll find out. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on February 16th, 2026. Kris, MCP, AI, open source, and more. Today we had a full conversation with Tobias Fenster. Like anybody who doesn't embrace it, yeah, it's not perfect, but if you don't embrace it, you're going to be in for a long ride.
Rude awakening.
A rude awakening. Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
Tobias.
Very good. How are you?
Very well.
Not
Been
too
looking
bad.
forward to speaking with you. Kris and I were just talking about this new thing called AI while we were waiting for the podcast to start. And
You're saying there might be an impact.
We were just sharing stories about this weekend, and I'm trying to build a website. I'm not a web developer. Maybe back in the day with Front Page or whatever. And I just I just need to build a website.
Wow,
or Front Page.
Way back in the 90s or 80s.
These days
Last
it's front
time
door and not good news, right?
Exactly.
No, front door.
Exactly. So it took me a couple hours to build a full site, a full web stack of where it's hosted, the different languages, TypeScript, Next.js and all that stuff. And I'm I would have never known any of those. But it took me maybe 2 hours to have a working website, and I can host it. It's awesome. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It is, and it's. We were also saying that if you're an organization or a person that hasn't adopted in some way, then you're a little behind. I think. And it's not just coding anymore. It's, and that's sort of where I was talking with Kris before. Some of the stuff is coding is just a small aspect of where it could be utilized. If you're looking at documentation, you're looking at project management, you're looking at a number of different things. So it's the buzz for the day. Unfortunately, you can't escape it, but, we do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I have a lot of things we wanted to speak with you. You do many great things, but before we get into that conversation, you might tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Tobias Fenster. I'm currently one of the co-founders and managing director at 4PS in Germany, but also working as what is called a chief engineer at the Hilti organization, because 4PS by now is part of Hilti, and that led to that little career change. So I'm basically spending my time 50-50 in between. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for Azure, for Business Central, a regional director, and a Docker captain. So also active in the community, thanks to my blog and podcast and a number of things like conference speaking, etc. that I do.
Yes, and all in that background, there's many different things that we wanted to catch up with you on. One being your podcast. You have a podcast, and there's a lot to podcasts. I see a lot of individuals start podcasts. I see a lot of individuals have podcasts, and I see a lot of individuals with podcasts that run for a short time. So tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So I have to start basically at a non-tech podcast I also do, and that is for the
Who
local.
does those?
That's the local sports. The local basketball club is playing at the highest German level, and a while ago, someone who runs a sports podcast on the internet called Sport Radio 360, a German one, asked for people who wanted to, talk to a number of people around that and just be there, get some statements after the games. And I've never done anything like that before, but I've always been into basketball for my local team. So I said, well, let's give it a try. And that was, I think, in 2016. So that got me started on the whole podcasting thing. And that has no connection at all to technology. But I realized, actually, I enjoy doing the podcast, but what I enjoy most is talking to people who are professionals in basketball and just being able to ask them questions I would never be able to ask them otherwise. And that then triggered the idea for my tech Window on Technology podcast, which is basically the same idea. I have people I would like to talk to. I have topics I want to talk about. And the podcast just gives me a very good excuse to ask them questions I otherwise never would ask them. Like, experts in their field, being from Microsoft, from the community, whatever, where I probably wouldn't have the time or wouldn't make the time, and they certainly wouldn't, to have a conversation for 30 minutes with me about a random topic, so to speak. And that's basically how I run that podcast.
I smile a little bit because there's a lot in there. One, I'm sure it's refreshing to be able to talk to people about something other than what you do on a day-to-day basis.
That's true.
To step away from the technology and still to be able to talk to people on the podcast. And I think the other point that you hit, I think, is something Kris and I have spoken about before, and it's kind of why we do this. And even when we talk with individuals, I think I mentioned it with you as well in the pre-podcast call, I have a conversation as if even nobody was listening, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to many of the individuals that we speak to, like you said, because you get to have an individual conversation with them, even though it's recorded for many people to listen to. You get to ask questions and have a one-on-one conversation with many people. And I'm fascinated and appreciative of that with everybody. And I say that because it's I've learned so much by being able to ask those questions, and met many individuals as well too. So no, you do. I didn't know about the basketball podcast, but I do listen to the tech podcast.
That's awesome.
The one I caught up with recently, I think, was with Jeremy Visca on there, talking about some of his projects and stuff too. So, and Andy Wingate, I think that was the last one.
Yeah.
Or maybe the second to last one. I'm not certain of the ones, but that's the one that I listened to.
That's the storytelling
recently.
one. Yeah, that's the one where Jeremy was saying. Yeah, that's good.
No, that's it's good. Jeremy's doing some great things as well. So
absolutely, yeah.
So we do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Now, yeah, you had mentioned that you do a lot of conference presentations, which is another topic that we talked about talking about. So let's dive into conference presentations a little bit here, a little bit away from the tech of actually like coding and developing. Let's talk about conferences.
Yeah. So maybe what got me into that, or what I like about it, is basically very early in my career, I self-defined as a very good developer, I would say. Probably a bit overambitious, because in my first few years I wasn't such a great developer, but still that was how I saw myself. And then I had a very nice boss at that time, and what she told me was, look, you're good at development. She didn't want to say me I'm mediocre, or I don't know, but you're good at development, but what actually makes you stand out is that you can still talk to business people in a way that they can understand. So she gave me that feedback. Look, you're good at tech, but basically the thing that maybe helps you differentiate along your career is that you can also talk about it. And that gave me that idea to, first of all, go into consulting. So I went basically from a developer to a development consultant when I taught customers and partners how to use our products or the products that we sold. And then it also was a bit of a segue into the whole conference speaking, because I felt like, okay, if I can do this for customers, I can maybe do it for a wider audience. And I still really very much like to do that for mainly two reasons. One, it's just fun. I just enjoy doing it. I mean, that doesn't stop me from being quite nervous when I step onto whatever kind of an audience that is, or whatever kind of stage it is I step on. I'm always kind of nervous, but it is still very much fun. And the other thing is, it sometimes helps me to focus on a specific topic or drive a specific topic that I always wanted to learn about, that I wanted to understand about, dive deeper into it. And sometimes I just hand in a session description with an idea. I'm pretty sure that it should work, not 100%. I typically let the organizers know in advance that this might not work out in the end, but it gives me an excuse and helps me to focus on, okay, this is something I really want to understand, I want to prepare, and then be able to share it with others. So those are, for me, the two aspects of speaking. It's fun. I like to do it. I think I'm okay at it. And it helps me to focus on specific topics I have on my agenda and might otherwise not find the time or make the time to really dive into.
No, you hit on some points there where if there's nothing like having to present a topic to force you to really understand it. So it's almost like we talked about with the podcast, being selected by the committee to present a topic at a conference also gives you the opportunity, or forces you for the opportunity to learn, have to really submerge yourself or immerse yourself into that topic to understand that topic. And you also mentioned a couple of things with the nervous. I literally said that to someone the other day, because over here in the United States, we have in April and May, you have the Directions North America conference, and then you have the Dynamics Con conference in May. And they both started sending out, I think they both started sending out, or one of them started sending out, and I can't keep track.
Directions started sending
Directions,
out. Yeah.
Directions, and I think
Approvals.
Dynamics Con will be sending this out soon. They started sending out their approvals, and that's what I was talking with somebody about, is it doesn't matter how often you do it or how many times you do it, you still get nervous. And you get, after you get selected, you get a little nervous about the topic, even if it's a topic that you could literally walk into a room and talk about freely. You still get nervous, because I know personally, I have to do the presentation. I have to make sure the delivery, you have to make sure. And it's a little bit different than if you and I were just sitting down with the same topic. So
you ever feel, when you do those things, you feel like the imposter syndrome? Like, I've certainly have gone through that, where like, I know the topic, but then like everyone looks at you and it's like, man, would I say something wrong, or was I off? You get that. It's like, maybe I don't belong on this stage. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. And then it just gets in your head. But yes, it is nerve-wracking when you get chosen to go ahead and present.
And then even afterwards, when you get the feedback, I don't know how it is for you, but there's the rational part of me that knows you can't do it right to everyone. Not everyone will like it. That's just the numbers game, right? But still, I can still tell you, for I think the second or third conference talk I had, it was very well received, like, I don't know, 20 positive feedbacks. But I still know there was one person who said, seemed very well prepared, but also boring. I still remember the exact words, right? So that's, I could have focused on the 20 that were positive, but that one stuck in my mind. And that's also part of it, why I'm still nervous. Is it going to be a boring one again? I don't know.
I don't mean to laugh. No, that's a little rough.
I've gotten those before.
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of different comments. I mean, I do value the feedback. I do value the feedback that's constructive as well, because again, anybody who attends a presentation should know that I haven't met anybody who does present that doesn't want to honestly hear ways that they could change the presentation, or if or what they're doing is being done well. I mean, not even saying they have to change it, but I always say the same thing. Give me the feedback, because it helps make sure that future presentations may be more favorable to some. But like you said, you can't please everybody. I mean, there's 9 billion people on this planet. The chances are that there's a few of them that aren't going to be in agreement with your presentation or what you have. So that's it. Are you doing do you have any lined up this year already to present, or they haven't released the ones in the European conferences at this point?
Yeah, indeed. So I have submitted to a number of them. I have gotten accepted to a few. So early in May, I'll be at one that's called the ADC, Advanced Developers Conference, and then one that's the Biz App Summit in Cologne, where I also talk about Business Central with the MCP server, and at Dynamics Minds in Slovenia. So those are the 3 that I already know, and I've submitted to a few others. So let's see what happens.
That's interesting. So speaking of development and Business Central, I do want to jump into a whole open source conversation with you as well once we get there. But you mentioned MCP. And you're doing a presentation on the Business Central MCP server.
Yes.
In your words, what is the Business Central MCP server? Well, Business Central MCP, is it even a server? Let's kind of break it down.
A physical server.
Yeah, indeed. And certainly not a physical server, but MCP is kind of the standard that allows those LLMs, those models, to talk to backends that had to be manually coded or very individually done in the past. And now there's this protocol called MCP that is kind of a generic adapter. They say it's USB for AI, in the sense that you suddenly no longer worry about what's the Apple One Lightning or whatever, or is it USB-A or whatever. It's just USB-C nowadays for a lot of the things.
Yes, yeah.
Indeed. And that's kind of the idea for MCP. You can plug in anything, it's the same standard, and now suddenly your model can talk to any backend. And the BC MCP is that one that Microsoft created and made available mostly, or most easy, through the Copilot Studio, but also possible to use from other clients, where you can just ask a question like, what are my top 10 customers in my Business Central instance. So you can start talking to your BC system, to your BC environment, and get meaningful business answers and have a conversation.
That So I think the MCP came out version 27.1, 27.2 around that time. It's so hard for me to keep up with these versions because I know now the agent preview came out with 27.4, or that's the new name, agent preview, from previously what many knew as the agent playground. And I think MCP was at, again, is it version 27 you need as well.
I also don't know because they do stuff, then they do stuff in preview. Sometimes it's private preview that we see as MVPs, right? So it's difficult to keep track of what happens when.
Correct, but I do know it's in the product.
Exactly right.
I do know it's in the product now, so we can talk about it. So that's
Indeed.
As of the time of this recording, it's in the product that someone can install. So MCP allows other agents, models, or other AI, I guess we could say, we'll just generalize with AI, be able to communicate with a Business Central implementation.
Yep.
Can it just read the data or can it write the data?
That's up to how you want to configure it. So to put that up front, it's not like everything's open and it's free to do whatever it wants. But you can configure what you want. For example, you can say this is only read only, or you can say only want to expose my customers and my vendors or something like this. So there's a big configuration that keeps you in control of that. But you can also enable it for write access, and then it can also create stuff, delete stuff, modify stuff.
So with the MCP configuration, you can determine which data is available, and then you can determine which data is available for reading and which data is available for writing. So theoretically, I could take a request of show me all my customers and their balance and the ones that have late payments or are overdue, excuse me. And then I could also write back and say, update and block all the customers that have a overdue balance unpaid. That's pretty impressive because now we've gone from having to run, it's almost having to go from, and I was thinking about this over the weekend about something else that I've been working on. We've gone from having to run reports to see this information, to take an action, to just saying, update my, I was playing with the agent preview, find the customers again with that same scenario with the overdue balance and block them. And now you can do that, with external systems. So you can do different analysis because maybe you can do additional analysis, with another MCP, with another product for that customer. That's pretty well. So,
yeah. And sorry to take that one step further, just to mention it. What's also then interesting, it's not only BC, right? You can also now integrate with other systems. I mean, if you have another tool in your company that you use for, I don't know, time tracking or whatever, you could also say, pull the time tracking data out of system A and plug it into my BC because there I want to create an invoice. So it's not only that you talk to one backend, but you can also talk to multiple backends if configured in the right way. Does it increase the chances that everything works perfectly? I mean, obviously not. You will still have to work on it and understand what it does. But the possibilities become a lot more interesting now suddenly that you're not only reading data and it's not only one system, but you can, as you mentioned, also write data and you can have it across the whole scope of whatever system you're using if they have some kind of an MCP port.
So Business Central has an MCP so that other systems can connect to it. Can Business Central natively connect to other MCP servers?
No, at least not that I know of. That kind of orchestration would be on the AI side. So something like Copilot Studio or other tools that you might want to use, they would talk to those different MCP servers. And that's kind of the idea, I would say, that you no longer create those point-to-point connections, but instead you have a generic way how you can connect to it. And then you have those orchestrators, or however you want to call them, that are able to talk to the different environments and the different tools.
Okay, perfect. So you have I always like to repeat what I hear sometimes just to, put it all together, right? So you'll have, so BC has access available to it. Other systems will have access available to it via MCP, but then you need some orchestrator that will determine which systems to communicate with, which systems to talk with to read, write data and perform different actions. Wow.
They need a handshake between two orchestrators.
It's I just feel like I'm in the Jetsons. You remember the Jetsons when I was like it's
Yes.
almost all the stuff that you saw growing up. It's almost like even the cartoons from the 50s and 60s are predicting the future. Like who would have thought it's that we would be here today with some of the stuff that I'm seeing, and it's I almost want to go back to just riding my bicycle and having a dime and going to the penny candy store to do that.
Or arcade, man, like penny arcades.
Yeah. So with that MCP, so you can create your own MCP within Business Central to determine which aspects of the system you want to expose.
So the MCP in itself is the general component, but you can configure it to make sure you're not exposing something that you don't want to expose.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed.
And it handles authentication and filtering. So if let's just say, have customer data and I have salespeople. So would it have the boundaries so that only certain pieces of data can be consumed by whomever's accessing it? Or do you have sort of one open access point with the orchestrator?
So what you typically would do is that you could have multiple configurations. One would be the sales configuration. One would be the, I don't know, technical configuration and the admin configuration and the finance configuration or whatever. So you could do that first, but also the MCP is typically connecting using my account. So I'm running the client. I'm telling I want to do a connection to Business Central, and that one would then prompt me for my credentials that would be used to log into Business Central. So that way, whatever I can do, the agent can do. But if my permissions are properly set up and I'm not just the super admin or whatever, which you definitely shouldn't do, as we all know, then the agent also can only do what I'm doing.
The good old super. I was working on something. I think it was setting up API access, and I think it actually prevents, when you're doing API setup, it prevents you from giving the account that gets created super, which I hope that they do with MCP as well, so that you don't inadvertently open yourself up. You had mentioned also. I want to get into more maybe the technical construct of MCP is how you say you configure and you build it in a minute. But you also, one thing you had just mentioned was you could set it up where you have multiple ones, is what I heard. You had mentioned sales in another area. So what would be a good strategy for setting up the MCP service if you have multiple ones available? As far as why you would do that and how you would do that?
I think there's two aspects to it. One is the configuration, that those different configurations that you could have, they could limit the access that the agents then have, because agents are getting quite confused when they have too much access. There's also something that's called dynamic tool. Whatever they can, dynamic tool discovery or something like this that helps with that. But generally speaking, the more you can limit the tools, the higher your chances are that the agent is doing the thing that you want it to do. So from that perspective, it could make sense to limit those tools that are available. So have a limited scope of your configuration, and then specifically talk to that configurations when you know, okay, now I want to do something that's sales oriented, or now I want to do something that's purchase or finance or whatever. So you could set up those different configurations. It's still kind of the same MCP server, but when you configure that that connection, then you would say, okay, now I want to use this configuration, I want to use that configuration. And that would help you to limit the scope, and that increases the chances that the agent is doing what you want it to do. At the same time, of course, it also limits the scope. So if you think about that super orchestrator agent that can do a lot of things, then it would need access to a lot of tools. But generally speaking, it would allow you to limit those that access scope basically, and make sure that the agent only sees the things that you wanted to see, not only from a permission perspective, but also from an what is even visible perspective.
That's a best practice. I think I've been hearing that quite a bit when you are building these MCPs and having it, do certain things. You have to be very specific to the intent of that, of the purpose of that, MCP you're building, so that you're right. So it doesn't wander off. It's doing exactly what you need it to do every single time, and eventually, as you had mentioned about having an orchestrator to also help and guide that orchestrator as well to know when to pull which agent or MCP that he needs to communicate for a specific purpose. So I think that's a good starting point, at least understanding that before going into building an MCP server, and then you wonder why it's not working according to what you're trying to do, because it's too many options. You have to narrow it down.
Yeah, indeed. And I have to say, it's probably similar to a lot of people who are nowadays talking about AI. It's not like I have 10 years of experience, because I mean, literally, this is really very, very new stuff. So I'm always cringe a bit when I hear, and that's not meant as criticism towards you, but if you say something like best practice, that a year ago, if someone had said best practice, then I would have said, okay, that implies 5 years and 100 projects. And now you can talk about a best practice. Yeah. And now suddenly someone who has opened it and done 3 projects is the expert and is sharing best practices. So, and I fully understand there's no other way. That was just why I'm reacting a bit. It's moving so fast. What used to be a best practice, quote unquote, last month, suddenly now there's this new super tool that can solve this automatically, and it's no longer required. And that's the time we live in.
I've always been a little apprehensive every time I heard the word, every time I hear the word best practice, because I say, who determines what the best practice is? Because oftentimes, in my opinion, again, it depends on what you're talking about, but sometimes best practices is also subjective. Yeah, I was just going to say subjective to the person you're speaking with. And you're talking about last month. Last month is years in AI life. It's what was, we use the word again, best practice. What was common last week, you wake up on Monday morning, is no longer common. It's a way to do things. So when you're saying you do these,
just a small comment on the best practice, because that is also something I learned from, because you mentioned the Directions conferences in North America. I was there once. One of actually my first couple of appearances at a conference was at the Directions North America. And what I learned there is what I considered good practice or interesting or whatever suddenly was no longer interesting, because the audience was so different, right? It was Directions EMEA, and then you have Directions North America. And I talked to developers at the same time, but they had completely different backgrounds. They had completely different tasks. The setup was so different. And I felt like, am I stupid? Are you stupid? I try to not think about other people as stupid, but I was like, there was a disconnect. Let me put it like this. There was an obvious disconnect that we didn't talk about the same things. And I hadn't felt that before. And then I learned, okay, the North American Business Central ecosystem, how partners work, what they do, that's just a completely different story. And neither of us was stupid. We were just coming from a different direction. And what was a best practice for me didn't make sense at all to the person I talked to. And that's also part of why I agree with you. Best practices sometimes can be a bit arrogant to think that you know the best practice.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Again, I always hear that about the conferences. I keep saying I have to get over to one of the European conferences, and everybody tells me just to see the difference as well. It's not to get over and experience the conference in whichever location is in the culture and the beauty of whichever city that they're hosting it in, but just to see also like the difference, as you had mentioned, because I talk with a lot of Europeans will come over, or individuals from Europe or other parts of the country will come over to the Directions North America conference, and they all say the same thing: is like it's not that one is better or worse. It's just different because the messaging is different. So I really want to get that experience in one day. I hope that I can do that. I always say I'll do it, but it becomes a logistic challenge at some point.
It's
to
not
say
a short
the least.
haul. Yeah.
No, it's not, because in Europe, Europe has a lot of countries that are close together, that you have transit together. Here, we have a big hop to go from, one continent to the other, so it gets a little challenging. But to jump back to the MCPs as far as setting up, so we talked about one strategy is to sort of compartmentalize or have different configurations by maybe area or some sort of subset of data. So you had mentioned maybe having a sales, which could have access to sales orders and customers possibly, or maybe you have some customer related configuration just as the customers and the ship to addresses. And then you have a sales order one. You could have a purchase order one or purchasing one, same type of breakdown, then maybe an inventory one if you want to do inventory values. So you have a different segmentation between those. So then also will help the orchestrator know which set of tools to use, so it doesn't have to scan the entire set of tools to choose the best one. It just knows that this configuration is for sales. Now we're talking about configuration. How do you configure it within Business Central? Like what is it made up of on the underlying point, and how do you determine what access the customer is? So what's the construct of it within Business Central?
Yeah, so what you have is basically a configuration page where you can just say, okay, this is the name of the configuration and this is what it's allowed to do on this and that functionality. Does it have read, write, modify? So read, create, modify, delete, and then you have the bound actions that basically trigger some code on an entity, and that is what you can do. You can say, okay, on that customer list, I want to allow read, I want to allow create, and I don't want to allow modified and delete. And that would be the configuration that you set up, and that then changes what is available as the MCP surface, so to speak.
So you may mentioning entities, so it sounds like it's API driven. So
yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay. So the MCP is configuration is a collection of APIs in essence. So with that allows end users and partners, if they're comfortable creating API pages, because in Business Central, that's what they call this, API pages. So you could create your own API configurations. I don't even know what to call things anymore. To be honest with you, the terminology seems to change all the time. So you have your own, you can create your own API configurations or API endpoints that you can put as part of an MCP on top of the APIs that Microsoft has available for you as well.
Yeah, and the thing is, you have those pages those API pages that are exposed, and then you have something like list customers, and then you also see the ID of the page. So if you still want to see what is connected to it, you basically see in those tools, it's what it's called in an MCP. You still see what the actual page is with the ID and what you can do with it, and that gives you a pretty direct connection between that tool, like list customers page XY, and the actual page in Business Central, so you know exactly what it's called.
Interesting. I am going to have to set some more of these up and play with them a little bit. And after my weekend working with some orchestration stuff, I want to see if I can get it to orchestrate with Business Central. And you had some your points that you hit touched upon, integrations and communication with other systems. Whereas before, a lot of times organizations would have to create connectors of some sort to connect the two together. Now, it sounds, I understand it's still, I don't even want to say new. I guess the whole thing is new because, this technology is not as mature, I guess you could say, as some of the long using technologies as we talk about changing. But it just makes it a little bit easier for them to be able to put all this together. And like you had said, hopefully you can limit the scope to have a little more accuracy. And I don't want to say, they don't say you're supposed to call it hallucinations because that's negative. What are you supposed to call it? It's supposed to be, no, that's what I was listening to something the other day, because hallucinations is negative. I don't know. I'll have to look that up anyway to go back that. So no, that's it. It's the same
fabrication.
Creativity.
It's fabrication, Brad.
Fabrication. Thank you.
That's what they're
Thank
saying.
Thank you.
Fabricates new stuff that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. So no, that's
the interesting conversation. Then you have that orchestration layer. Okay, first step. Second step is, what does that mean for functionality that currently actually partners create for customers, your small PTEs? Is that something that should still be in PTE, or should it now be something that is created by your agent? Similar to the conversation we had in the past around the Power Platform. Am I creating a PTE in Business Central, or am I creating a Power App? Now the question is, am I creating a PTE? Am I creating a Power App? Or am I just letting an agent do the magic and trust that it actually works? And then you have the layer on top that's AI in the product, but you can also do AI in development. So what's stopping me from saying, create a PTE for me that does exactly this and that? And it just opens up so much. And that's the software development part only. If you now think about requirement management, if you think about documentation, if you think about quality assurance, it's at the core of it, and where I find it started was basically software development, having a bit of a helper on that, and then letting it go and create the whole stuff. Once it got agentic, you see similar things in M365 Copilot, where yes, it could help me to set up or to create the summary of my meeting that I had and come up with to-dos. And now suddenly it can do a bit more. It can create stuff. It can finish to-dos actually for me. And then if you think about next step, okay, why are we in between that as partner? Why can't an end customer do it themselves? And who are the people at the end customer who are doing this? Do we need those anymore? What's the role going to be in the future? And there,
Yeah,
I'm starting to struggle.
yeah, it does lower the barrier of for entry for things that you could do with Business Central. But at the same time, if you have someone that does that, you run into issues that they may not understand it. Yes, it lowers the barrier, but if they don't understand it, that's when people like us come in and be like, okay, yeah, I mean, it got you there fairly close, but you don't, maybe you're not quite understanding the approach or the architect. So dangerous world for a minute. I'm sure it'll improve.
You hit a point, and I think it was a challenge that we had with the Power Platform when it was released to be able to work with Business Central. This is that to another level, where the years ago software development was the key. So the ability to create, to receive a design from somebody who created it, to develop that, even if you self-created. I'm saying somebody created a design, and then somebody was given the design, and they came back like magic, and now you have something that does something. Now it's almost where it's changing, where you need to know the technologies to build the proper design, and then this is where AI is becoming good at creating your design. Right. It's almost like giving it off to someone and doing the magic, but it's also how you orchestrate. Again, you talk about the MCP orchestration, or somebody, an orchestrator managing the different MCP configurations. Now understanding the technology stack, understanding the technology and the functionality to be able to now review what gets done by those different pieces. See, this is what I keep saying is, everyone kind of laughs at me or something, but I say software development's dead, right? I don't mean it's dead like it's going away. I'm saying it's dead as we know it, because now it's like the developers have to come up a level. And in business, I'm talking within Business Central as well, because now you have to understand the application, you have to understand the technology and the options to then be able to give it to an AI, to be an AI. I don't even know, I call it AI because it means different things. To give it to a model, or to give it to an agent, or give it to whatever you'd like to call it, to create something that you then review to make sure it meets the stack. So the role is sort of being pulled back. And then also from the functional side, it's being pushed down to where now you have that hybrid of, you need to be functional from business point of view and technical from architectural point of view to know that all these things exist to help sort of guide the road that we go on. That was my long-winded speech. I'm sorry.
No, but I fully agree. And I think that's one of the benefits of being a BC developer compared to, let's say, a C# or Java developer, because BC always was very business focused, right? There's no way you can be a good, at least in my opinion, that you're a good BC developer without having a good understanding of the business part of it, understanding how it all works, having a clear understanding of the requirements, because there is not really a lot of plumbing code or technical code that doesn't do business value, right? Everything we do in BC is connected to the business requirement. It is for a reason, a business requirement of the customer. Now, if you compare that to someone who is doing C# or Java or Rust or whatever, there might be that technology code that does nothing but put the database together with the cache and your business logic or something like this. And those people who were very far away or are very far away from the actual business application, I think for them it's an even more disruptive change, because that I'm pretty sure an AI will do very, very soon and will do better than any human can do. But the job that a Business Central developer typically does, understanding a business requirement and translating that, that is something that is very, very valuable still in the world of AI, because that's actually what I need to tell the AI to do. Now, if I'm the person who derives most joy out of writing the lines of code, that might be a challenge in the future. But if I'm the person who enjoys understanding the requirement and making sure that the code happens and we arrive in a good place where we have code that actually does what I want it to do and is maintainable and is very solid from a quality and performance perspective, that is something that's not going to go away. Will I still write the code? Probably not. Do I need to understand the code and review it at some point? Probably yes. I mean, you also see people who say, okay, I just let it also create test automation and then I'm good. There, I'm not convinced that this really works for complex requirements yet, but let's see where we go. But the need to understand the business need or the business requirement and translate it into code, that's basically the same, I would say.
Spot on.
You nailed it, I think. I think Business Central is a little more challenging because, as you had mentioned, we're in a box already. Like we have an existing, it's not greenfield, create an application that does this. It's, we have a box that we're in and we need to enhance that functionality. So it's a little more challenging. So again, as you had mentioned, it's imperative, important for someone to understand the application, the flow of the application. And reading code is much different than writing code, because it's much easier to read a book, in my opinion, and understand a book and then make suggestions than it is to write a book from scratch. So if you're writing it from scratch, you may struggle and have challenges. But if you're reading code that gets output by a model, you'll be able to follow along and say, oh, this is not proper. This is proper. So there's a clear distinction there. So it's not, it's simplifying it in a sense from the technical point of view, making it a little more challenging from the business point of view, because you really need to understand those processes and how that works. So
it's also more challenging, right? It's very information dense. If I'm writing code, there are still moments where I can, if I'm in the flow, I can kind of relax because I exactly know what I'm doing. Now, if I'm just reviewing code over and over again, I need to understand what is happening. At least for me, I would say that takes a higher mental burden. It's more exhausting than creating stuff, reviewing, having an idea, understanding, giving feedback to that machine that always says, yes, perfect, you're right. And then understanding, no, I might actually not be right. So let's take a closer look at it. From that perspective, and I'm seeing some people in the wider development ecosystem who are also starting to think about that. What does that mean for the developer role then in the future? How do we stay focused? Are you able to just orchestrate 20 agents running around and creating stuff and reviewing and whatever? Is that something that a human is able to do at the end of the day? That's also something we need to learn. Sorry, that's not very, very much on the meta level, but something that popped up recently in my bubble somehow. And it's a fascinating question as well.
It is. Well, I'll go along with your philosophical question. It is a fascinating question, and it's you have to think about it because
it'll come.
It's coming, but what do we do when no one knows it? And this is again philosophical, because now we're talking. This technology is so new. We're talking months. We're not talking years, right? Or maybe a year. Or about, right? The LLMs were created many years ago, but to the extent of where the code is being generated, and the code is being generated properly, and even for AL coding, I've created some stuff with AI or with the models that is spot on, and it's much better than I would have done, or many of the developers that I know would have done, including documentation, including, here's a list of a summary of changes, and this is how you should test it. Like, all comes with it. But I can look at it because I've been developing for so long and know that it's okay. Now let's just now we have everybody that's a developer today elevate them to the role of this orchestrator of business knowledge. Let's just say everybody falls into a nice place there. We're all going to get old. We're going to retire and no longer be working in the space. Hopefully, I get to retire at some point in my life. What about new people coming in? Because if they're not, I don't want to say brought up, but if their career doesn't progress with them learning the fundamentals to be able to make that distinction, what happens? So what happens in 10 years when all of the old timers, as we'll call them, retire?
And 10 years is probably a defensive guess, right? That change might happen
I'm
sooner.
trying to be nice.
But the counter argument, at least for me, to that is: do you still know exactly how to write a SQL statement? Do you know how to create assembler code? That was, we leveled up that one abstraction level, and especially AL or CAL in the past is then even one abstraction level on top of that. Maybe AI is just the next abstraction level. Maybe we don't worry about that anymore in 3 years, 3 months, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But at some point, maybe we don't worry about that anymore because AI just does it perfectly. All we need to do is be able to describe the requirement in the right way, and then AI is able to do it perfectly the same way as C# code hopefully nowadays transpiles correctly into assembler code. That, I don't know, but that could be an outcome, that we're just one abstraction level higher and everything still works. The learning is typically it helps to be one level below what you actually need. So even if you're writing AL code, it's still very helpful if you have an idea how SQL works, not for 80% of your work, but for the interesting 20 or maybe even 10% of your work, it helps a lot because then you can dig into the performance issues that you see. So if that's the right idea, then we should probably still understand it, but do we have to? I don't know.
Yeah, that's just like I put that similar to like pilots, right? We still need pilots. I mean, clearly the plane can fly on its own most of the time, but you still need someone to be seated and know what to do if that doesn't work. So I don't think it's necessarily going to go away, but you still got to learn how to do it manually if needed. And I think that comes into that that you had mentioned earlier, is understanding the business logic or the business space in that area. But it is tough because I had someone ask me if should their kid be learning how to develop, and should they still go to, learn all this stuff. And I said, yeah. My answer was yes. I think they should still. But again, it goes back to that barrier to entry is much lower, because then they can just get all that information as quickly as possible and then build what they're intended to build. So that's going to be a tough one. I think it's going to be a couple of years, man. I know you said 10 years, but you're being super nice.
I am. My true feeling is different. I liked your response, and it really puts a good perspective on it. If you're talking about understanding one layer lower than where you need to be, because I was thinking, I did learn assembly. I'm that old. They taught me assembly. Again, that was the one level below, because I first started with other languages, and then I had to know assembly. I didn't learn punch card, which was the predecessor of that in essence. Will it even matter? I think you're correct. How many people know assembly language today? I'm sure there's a small few that need it for something, maybe in there, depending on where they are, but it's not wide scale use of assembly for developing software. Maybe for some hardware controls or some other things like that it is. So I think that is an interesting perspective, because it's a skill living today we think that we need, but we have to be a little more abstract, and in the future say, just like some of the skills that were needed in the 1900s, not many of us know how to make our own clothes or make our own soap or make our own milk and cheese, because we don't need to. But there is still a set to do. That's a very valid response. You just shot me down now. So now I'm going to...
That was absolutely not my intention. I have no clue if it will be right, but I think that's a perspective you can have. That's the point.
No, it's your perspective. When I say, listen, that's my sarcasm. Everyone kind of knows my sarcasm's a little harsh sometimes, but no, I think your perspective was good, and it's a great way to look at it. So we'll have to see where we are. in the future. See, I could talk to you all day
Next
about this
month.
stuff.
It could be next month, man.
That's the interesting
It
one,
could be
right?
quick,
Yeah.
right?
Let's see.
By the time this comes out, this might be outdated. So
Yeah. Look,
Better be
just like
fast
at the
with that one.
beginning,
Yeah.
just like the beginning of this podcast, when we were talking about, a weekend project. I mean, I would have had to like go online course to learn how to create websites. I didn't have to do that. I mean, 2 hours, that's what it feels like right now. So
yeah, it is. It's amazing. So we have a lot of things we wanted to speak about. I had to be respectful of your time, but another thing that's we're pretty interesting topic is this whole topic of open source software. Because I know it's another thing that you like to speak about and talk about as far as open source software. And now, even take this a little bit further, we just spent some time talking about AI generating code. And I did hear an interesting conversation over the weekend about how AI is impacting or could impact open source software. So let's talk briefly about some open source software and your take on open source software.
I mean, generally in the past, I really enjoyed being part of some of those things and contributing in very small ways, but still contributing to open source. But because it felt like so much business software was built on it, so much money was made from it, but still there were people who were basically doing it for free for the sheer joy of just doing it. And that was, I was very much attracted to that. Let's put it like this. The whole idea very much appealed to me, that someone was willing to just spend their time to do something for the fun of it and making sure that something got better without getting directly paid for it or anything. That's a very nice concept. The point is now with AI that you're seeing more and more struggle with that, because some AI bots are just flooding open source repositories with meaningless or maybe meaningful but still not good enough pull requests and feedbacks, etc. Maybe you saw that story that I saw over the weekend as well, where someone declined a pull request by a bot, and then that bot spun up a blog and wrote about it. I mean, that's crazy, right? Where's the limit to that? What's the point? What are we even doing here? And then you have more and more open source libraries that say, look, the whole idea of why I did this was I wanted to get attention. I wanted developers to see my solution and then maybe upgrade to the premium tier or get some license money out of it. And now suddenly no developer is seeing it anymore because a bot is an agent is crawling that and just getting the information, using it. The developer doesn't even know that they're using this and that great open source library. So they decided to shut it down. It's no longer free. It's no longer open. You have to pay for it. You can still contribute, but to use it, you have to pay for it because that's the only way how it can be monetized. And that also might have an impact on how we create software. Maybe less so in the Business Central world where it's not that much open source, but in other parts of the ecosystem that suddenly also becomes very relevant, because the way how open source was monetized, or at least a big part of it, the appeal that it had, that you can, as an open source author, also get some visibility and maybe land a job through your open source project, or you upgrade to the premium level and you get some money out of it. All those aspects suddenly go away if it's just an agent that is pulling information out of your repository.
So it is, the open source market is going to have some sort of disruption. And listening to you speak about that drives me to another philosophical question of what happens when we're saturated with all this software. Like, when does, if models were trained based on, and you may give me the same answer you gave me to the last philosophical question, but if the model was trained on open source, let's just say, I mean, I know it was trained on other things as well, but let's just narrow the scope, open source software, and it was able to read all of these libraries to determine how to create code. And then now it's making modifications to the code, and then it's going to continue learning on that code because it created that code. When does the cycle end? Do we stop creating new stuff, or is the AI going to create new stuff itself? Or
that's also what you see, right? That it goes off and creates new stuff that it thinks it needs, but it might just be a copy of what already existed because that's what it was trained on. So there is indeed a cycle that is interesting to see if and when it will be broken, and if not, what that does.
Yeah, that open source, I did see that same thing. That was a crazy story on how somebody made a pull request, a bot made a pull request, and then commented back about being the client. Now, some of the stuff I'm starting to say on the internet, the whole like not everything you read on the internet's true. I'm starting to feel more and more of that now, where how much of it's being fabricated versus not fabricated. I mean, I had the opportunity to start working with OpenClaw, Multi, CloudBot, whatever name you want to call it, and it's not so easy to set up and start working with. So all these people that say they're running, 10 billion agents on OpenClaw, running, large organizations doing this, I have to sometimes question how, or even to what extent are they running your business? If they're just running and not doing anything, that's one thing, or running and actually orchestrating many tasks, that's another thing. Yeah. So with the open source market, so do you see that we'll just see a decline in open source projects, or feel that we have a decline in open source projects with that?
I mean, there's two contradicting things to consider here. A, it is a lot easier nowadays to create something that's open source, because I can literally just tell an agent, look, this is the library I need, please create it for me, put it on GitHub and make it visible. It will create perfect documentation. It will create automated testing. It will do more than I could even think of. So in that sense, it's a lot easier now to create something like this. I mean, I do run a couple of open source tools that took me quite some time. If I now had to recreate them, it would probably be same as the website you mentioned, Kris. It would probably be only a few hours, which took me days or sometimes even weeks to create in the past. So from that perspective, I would say it's easier than ever to create something and make it available to the public as open source or however you want to. But for the same reasons we mentioned before, what's the point now? I can't remember what it was called, but I saw a project running now that basically was a collection of tools for one specific person for one specific task, because it's so easy now to create software if you have a rough idea what you actually want, and just put it on the internet, put it on GitHub, and that project, I need to remember what it was called, but the idea was basically a collection of tools that had been created by people for one specific purpose. No thinking about reusability, sharing, whatever. It just did exactly what they wanted to do. And you can imagine that this is now, really very, very easy. And if you have a huge collection of that, you might find things that are useful for you too. So that could be a driver. At the same time, for the reasons we mentioned before, the whole business model, the whole appeal of doing open source for some kind of a business value is declining rapidly, I would say.
So software is becoming disposable, because now you can create the tool that you need at the time to do a specific task.
Yeah.
And it's almost now, we're in a certain universe because we're all developers, right? Or our lens is through knowing many developers, or even being close to many developers. So my first inclination now is, I need to do something. What are my choices? I could search for it. And then when I can search for it, I could try to find an application that has the functionality that I'm looking for. Then I have to test it. And then now I'm skeptical, because was it AI created and is it going to have problems? Or do I just go through a plan with Claude, come up with a good plan, say create it, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and it's there. This is kind of where we are in the world. And it may not even be going to bed and going to sleep. It may be 5 minutes later as well. It's
grabbing a coffee, right?
Yeah. Yes. So it's, does software become disposable, and is the value of the software decreased because the ease and the ability to create it, whereas years and years ago, that magic was to be able to create those things for people. So it's another interesting philosophical but yet technical point of view on it. So
and the same for the question between general purpose software and specifically for one purpose built software. So if you think about, let's say, time tracking, if you want to build a time tracking solution that caters to the needs of a big industry or even a whole country or something like this, it's very complicated, right? Because people have very different ideas of what they need out of a time tracking software. It needs configurations. It needs to align with laws. Then if you want to go multi-country, you suddenly have the complexity of different laws in different countries, etc. But if I think about one specific company, maybe not a huge enterprise, but I don't know, 50 or 100 people company, they could have very simple requirements for time tracking. So it's absolutely possible that they could just let Claude do that or some other agent do that and create it for them. What does it mean for the market of the general purpose time tracking providers, right? For which purposes do we still need professionally build software that caters to the needs of a lot of companies? And what are the kind of problems? What's the class of problems that we can solve with your one-off solution that maybe works for a year or two, and then we just create the next one, or maybe a month or two, right? And then we create the next one. That is also an interesting disruption that might happen in the software market. And if you look at some of the stock market reactions for SaaS vendors, some of it is already visible that there seems to be a decline in trust into how much of that we still need.
Yes. Yeah. No, those are very interesting questions. And I'd love to have conversations or hear from many people on their perspective and viewpoints on that, because it's to the point where you're creating something for a task. I've created tools, and I'm only saying it myself because it's not that I'm anyone special. It's just a real world use that I've created tools I used once and now they're gone. I was able to do what I want, and I wasn't even worried about it. Like I got to that point of, I'm not even concerned, because if I need something, I can reuse this and build it or add to it. So have you done anything like that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the example that comes to mind is the podcast that I mentioned initially, the sports podcast. The guy who did it decided to go in a slightly more professional direction, and that meant that my part of it kind of went out of it, and I had to set up my own podcast, but I didn't want to lose the history. So I created a small tool that just grabbed the RSS feed from the old one, downloaded everything, put it in the right order, created a new one for me that I could import in my new target. That would have been basically impossible in the past, because I'm pretty sure it would have taken me 2-3 days to create it, or maybe just one day, and I most likely wouldn't have wanted to spend that much time. Now I could just plug it into the agent, GitHub Copilot in that instance, let it run. It took me 2-3 attempts, and then I had what I needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, and then I just threw it away again. And I mean, it literally was a problem that would have been not possible for me to solve with a meaningful amount of work. It would have just been too much time, too much effort. And now it suddenly wasn't a problem anymore.
Wow.
Welcome to 2026, where you can have custom. I mean, if you think about that, that's custom, purposeful, developed software for your needs. You had a specific scenario with specific requirements. They weren't general or generic. Jeez, I get tongue-tied when I start getting excited about this. And you're able to just do it. It goes with, it's almost like when we talked about at the beginning of this episode about talking with people and hearing what they have to say, learning from them, and having one-on-one conversations. Now you're having that one-on-one conversation with software to have your specific needs. And like you said, good enough. Right, good enough so that you can get the job done. A lot of times that good enough comes into play even in professional, what you call professional grade software, professional grade work, because it gets the task done for you. And again, it probably took minutes for that to, maybe you said you went 2 or 3 tries. So maybe would you spend an hour or 2 hours on that? Whereas if you would have done that to write something yourself, for example, it could have taken weeks. So that's what we're doing, is we're condensing weeks into hours. Hopefully we all have a little more time to go to the beach, hike mountains, or do other good things. I'd say start picking up trash, but that's what I think everybody should do.
Absolutely. Let's wrap the AI topic on that note. That's I don't know. I'm not sure if that's overly optimistic, but if we end up like this, that it gives us more time to do what we actually want to do, that would be amazing.
I think that would be amazing. Well, Tobias, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I enjoyed all of your valuable insights and your perspective on many things. If anyone would like to get in contact with you to talk about some of the topics we spoke about, or find more information either one of your podcasts, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
So there is tobiasfenster.io, my first name, last name.io. That's basically my my homepage where you can find my podcast, where you can find my blog, and also my social links. By now, I'm active on LinkedIn and on Blue Sky. More than happy to have any conversation there. And let me know if you see anything that you like or don't like. As we said in the beginning about conference talks, feedback is very valuable, and I would say the same is true for everything I do online. And very much for having me. It was a really nice conversation, and I would love to follow up and to hear your thoughts on a number of other topics as well.
Oh, we will.
Awesome.
We'll have to do something. We'll schedule a follow-up. I'm into scheduling follow-ups now because the way the times change. But greatly appreciate you spending your time with us today, because again, time is truly the currency of life. Once you spend it, you can't get it back. So any moment you spend with somebody, any moment you spend doing something or doing something with somebody, you don't get that time back. So I do value and appreciate your time. And I look forward to talking with you again soon. Ciao, ciao.
Take care.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.